Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am going to play with my alcohol inks. I actually purchased these from Crafter's Companion when they went on super sale. They're actually the Spectrum Noir alcohol ink refill bottles, but each bottle actually does come with a plastic eyedropper, and that's really fun for creating your sort of alcohol ink backgrounds. And so that's primarily why I bought these, not necessarily to refill my alcohol markers. I'm actually going to use acetate as the substrate that I'm going to build my background onto. And before I do any alcohol ink or put any alcohol ink on here, I actually spritzed it with just isopropyl alcohol and wiped it down just to wipe off any fingerprints, wipe off any dust, and just clean everything. And I actually cleaned both sides just to make sure it was all clean. But you really only need to do that on the side that you plan to apply the ink. And I'm working with a color palette that I've actually never worked with before, so it'll be interesting. I didn't know how it would turn out once it was done, but I actually like this color combo. So I've got jade green, a yellow, and an earthy brown. The brown, though, is very, very intense. And so what I decided to do was I wanted to be a little bit more deliberate with where it went and how much of it was getting applied. Bubble wrap, and I dipped it into the one area where I initially laid down or dropped the ink, and then I moved that alcohol ink to other areas on my panel. This panel is actually 6 inches high by 12 inches wide. That way I can get a couple different size backgrounds cut from this, or be a little bit more selective about the areas that I want to use. If there's one area, because you never know how these backgrounds are going to turn out. And so there might be one area that just looks a little bit more interesting than another. And by making a background larger than the project that I plan on making, I can be really selective about how I cut this down and use it. Normally, I have only ever used bubble wrap on gel prints. But I use it in the same way when I do use it on my gel printing, which is to lift color from one area and then place that color right back down on another area. And it leaves a beautiful pattern because of the, that bubble pattern of the bubble wrap. And with alcohol inks, it's a little bit different in the sense that you will create a little bit of a different texture with it, but it's actually going to mellow out a little bit as it melds with the surrounding inks, and you do lose that definition of that circular pattern that the bubble wrap initially creates. However, when I do my alcohol inks, I do like to work in thinner layers, and then I'll give it a little bit of time to dry and then put more inks on top and build up layers, build up texture on top of texture. What I found was if you wait a little bit and you use your bubble wrap to move your inks around and add that texture, if it's a little bit dry, if it's started to dry a little bit, it tends to hold that pattern a little bit better because it's not as fluid. And so if you want for the pattern to be a little bit more well defined, then try waiting a little bit to dip your bubble wrap into the ink. And you'll know that it's a little bit tacky when you pull up your bubble wrap and your acetate lifts up a little bit with it. So that's sort of my mark for when that ink is still just, it's dry enough to where it'll grab a little bit and hold its texture, but it's not so dry that it won't take an impression by the bubble wrap. So really, really fun technique. I had a blast making this. And I should say that my video today is part of a collaboration that is put together by Jen Lee Card Making here on YouTube. And if you want to find all of the videos from the other creators who are joining in this collab, just click on the hashtag CardHop in July 2023, and that should bring up all of the videos that are part of this collaboration. And I'll try, if I can get all of the links to each specific individual video, I'll leave those direct links in the description box below, just in case that hashtag isn't working for you, and that way you can still find everybody's video. The two techniques that are being featured are one, either bubble wrap, which I've chosen to work with today, or the second is crackle. So I'm excited to hop along and see which technique everybody chose, and maybe learn some new ways to use the different techniques that they are going to showcase. The last little finishing touch, I did let this panel dry a little bit, and this is the part that's really, it's the toughest for me whenever I'm working with alcohol ink panels, because I love the look of it. I just never know when to do this part, which is to apply some foil. This is transfer foil. It's the kind of foil that you can use through a laminator, you can use through your ink machines, or apply with a transfer gel, any kind of medium that is sticky. And if you recall when I was talking about, letting your alcohol ink dry a little bit so that it's tacky, but not fully dry, in order to have a more defined impression of the bubble wrap design. Similarly, if you catch your alcohol inks at that point and apply this transfer foil on top, it's tacky enough to grab the foil. And if you wait too long, then it's completely dried to the touch, and it won't actually pull the foil off of the carrier sheet. And if you don't wait long enough, like I did in some areas, your foil sheet will actually lift the alcohol ink because it's still too fluid. And I did have that happen as well. What's governing that is how much ink has accumulated in that area. So there are going to be some areas where there's more ink that hasn't spread out, and that's going to take longer for the alcohol to dry. And so if you are able to catch it at a point where it's still not completely dry, but dry enough to still be tacky, that's when it can grab your foil. But if you go too soon, it's too liquidy, and so all that's going to happen is you're going to move your ink. And if you wait too long, it's going to be completely dry and it won't grab anything. It'll be set. So it's one of those things that's kind of tricky, but what I love about using acetate as opposed to something like a Yupo paper is that it's completely clear, so now you can use it on projects in different ways. And as well, you can either use the top side where you were applying the ink, or you can flip it over to the back, and maybe you get something a little bit different, a little bit more interesting by just flipping it over. Of course, if you're going to be using the foil technique and you manage to get a little bit of foil to transfer, then you'll probably want to use the top side because that's where the foil will be visible. But if you are building up layers like I like to do with my alcohol ink panels, it may actually look very different. Well, not very different, but it may look different from the bottom or the back as opposed to from the top. So it's worth just checking out from both sides which side you might like better. So that's one of the things I really like about using acetate. Today I'm just making this simple card, but our theme today is to make anything that isn't a card. So to go along with my card, and this is what I like to do when I make creative backgrounds, is I like to either put them in some sort of an art journal, but these days I've been really enjoying ATCs, artist trading cards. They measure 2.5 by 3.5, and I've got this white piece of cardstock that I've already cut down to that size, and I was moving it around that panel that I had left to just see, where which spot I wanted to use, and I threw both, like, everything over to one side, and I saw one piece, like the leftover piece of acetate. It just happened to be overlapping the piece that I wanted to use. And I really liked the look of it. And that's another really cool thing about doing this technique onto acetate. And that is that you can stack these acetate one on top of the other. And you can also flip them around, put one on top, switch it around so that the other one's on top, turn them, to their back versus their top sides, and just see what all the different combinations are and the effects that you can create. It's pretty cool. I like the look of it so much that I decided I would actually apply both 2 layers of acetate onto this ATC. And one of the reasons why I like putting just like a small piece of these backgrounds into an art journal, or in this case, making an ATC that I can then put into a little album, is just so that I can actually put some notes down on the back of this ATC and note, if I was experimenting with a particular technique, or note the color combination. And I have a little bit of a swatch, so to speak, so that later I can go back to this and reference, oh, how did I make that? And it may not be completely obvious, especially this with the bubble wrap technique. Was the first time I used bubble wrap, so I definitely want to make a note of that, because it's not 100% obvious that I used bubble wrap, because in some of the areas it didn't hold its pattern really well. And yeah, it's very, very curious because it looks very different from other areas. So it's likely the sort of thing that I would find really interesting, but totally forget how I made unless I jotted it down. So with something like a clear plastic or acetate, one of the challenges is that when you go to glue that down, the adhesive itself can actually alter or change the look. And I got around that a little bit by just applying adhesive edge to edge with my adhesive sheet. So while it did change the look of the panel, it almost darkened it a little bit, at least it's uniform, so that it doesn't have like a line of tape all the way around the edges where the adhesive was applied. And so here's a final look at my ATC that has it layered up, my card that is just a single layer, and then my leftover panel, which is large enough for me to make a second card with, or even a couple more ATCs with. So I hope that you enjoyed this video today featuring using bubble wrap in a way that was totally different and new to me. Definitely will be doing this more, and as well featuring an ATC, which is a really fun little project, fun to trade and swap with other crafty friends as well. I hope you'll hop along and check out everybody else's video in this collaboration. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.